Imagine this. It's early on a Saturday morning. You think you are lying in your bed. It feels like hours have passed and it's time to get up. And then in an instant, you realize you are not in your bed at all. You are lying on the floor in a different room and your husband is desperately trying to wake you up. That's exactly what happened to me in December 2022. At that time, I was running my small business making bath bombs. It was December 2022, as I mentioned, and it was one of the busiest periods of the year. Orders were coming in constantly, and I was working long hours every single day, sometimes until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, just trying to keep up. I didn't really allow myself to stop. Even when I looked out of the window and I saw a beautiful day, I remember thinking how much I want to go for a walk, just for a walk, just to breathe for a moment, but I couldn't. I always felt I had to do more orders, I had to push, I had to do more tasks, one more thing before I could rest, some housework, etc. Always constant thoughts in my head. I was very responsible with my work, maybe too responsible. I didn't want to let anyone down. At the same time, I was under a lot of emotional pressure. A short time before this happened, I had received very sad news. A young woman I knew in Glasgow, around my age, who had been fighting cancer for several years, had passed away. She left behind husband and 2 children. I remember being added to a WhatsApp group where people were discussing her funeral. It felt very real and very close to life. I was planning to attend, obviously. It stayed with me for more than I expected. It made me think about how fragile life can be, even when someone seems strong and determined to keep fighting. Around the same time, I was also started to feel very unwell. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just feel like a common cold, a bit of weakness. But I didn't really think about it, I just kept going. I kept working. Looking back now, I can see that I was completely ignoring the signals my body was giving me. But at the time, I didn't recognize it. I just thought I need to push through it. And that's how those days went. Working, sleeping very little, thinking constantly about orders, responsibilities, and everything I still need to do, some housework, etc. Until that Saturday morning came. The morning everything suddenly changed. That Friday felt like any other Friday, just an ordinary working day. I finished work late, completely exhausted. Christmas is the busiest time of the year for me, and my mind just wouldn't switch off. Even when I finally went to bed, I was still thinking about orders, customers, and everything I needed to do following week. Before going upstairs, I remember feeling incredibly thirsty. I drank some water in the kitchen, but I didn't take a bottle with me upstairs to my bedroom. I was so tired that I just wanted to go to bed and sleep. Eventually I managed to fall asleep, even with my thoughts rushing through my head. Then at around 5 o'clock on Saturday morning, I suddenly woke up. My throat was so dry that I couldn't barely open my mouth. It feels like every drop of moisture had disappeared. All I wanted was a glass of water, really. But I didn't have any water next to my bed. So I got up and started walking downstairs. The moment I stood up, I realized something wasn't quite right, but I couldn't understand what was it. I've been tired before, like everybody else, obviously, but this was completely different. My body felt unbelievably weak, almost as if it didn't belong to me anymore, if you know what I mean. As I slowly made my way downstairs, one thought kept going in my mind: Elena, please don't fall, please don't fall. I just keep repeating it in my head. I remember using the wall kind of to steady myself as I carefully walked down each step. Eventually I reached the kitchen. I remember seeing the glass kettle on a worktop, and then everything went black. That is the last clear memory I have before losing consciousness. what I'm about to describe next is simply how I remember experiencing those moments. I don't know whether it was a dream or my brain reacting to lose consciousness or something I can't explain. I'm not trying to convince anyone to anything. I'm simply telling you exactly what I remember. The first thing I became aware of, an incredibly clear night sky. It was filled with stars, more stars than I have ever seen before. It immediately reminded me of my childhood in Yakutia, in the north of Russia. When I was growing up there, the sky, the night sky in particular, was breathtaking. You could see the Milky Way so clear because there was almost no light pollution at all. But this sky was even more beautiful. It felt endless, and standing in front of that sky were 4 figures. 3 of them I had, I couldn't recognize. It was like blurred faces. But one figure on my left looked like my grandmother, my dad's mom. She wasn't elderly. She looked like maybe in her 40s or 50s. She looked like quite young, and with her hair tied back. I recognized her immediately. But the 3 figures, I couldn't see who was it. So the 4 figures seems to be communicating with one another. There was completely silence. I couldn't hear a single word they were saying, but I had the unmistakable feeling that they were talking about me. What surprised me the most was how peaceful everything felt. I wasn't frightened, I wasn't in pain or anything. All I remember, I felt complete peace. Peaceful moment I never felt before. I was in peace, if you know what I mean. Like nothing ever mattered. The only thing I couldn't understand was why I couldn't hear them. I remember thinking, what did I do? As if they were judging me or something. What are they talking about? Why are you talking about me? Those questions kept repeating in my mind. I kind of kept almost asking them, but it was playing in my head. As I watched them, I had the impression that my grandmother was trying to explain something to other 3 figures. I don't know if that's really what was happening or if that's simply how my mind experienced that. But that's exactly how I remember it. It felt as though she was trying to make them understand something about me, trying to convince them somehow. The other seems to be listening to her. Then everything disappeared again. I closed my eyes, I remember, and it's like hours went by. It's as if I was sleeping for hours and hours. But later that day, I started to remember the fragments, what's happened. I remember being on the floor. I seemed to be pulling myself forward with my hands, kind of like trying to move, trying to pull myself up. Then everything went black again. Another brief moment came back. This time I remember kind of crawling on the floor. Then darkness again. It feels like I was drifting in and out of consciousness, almost as if my body was trying to survive while my mind was somewhere else. I don't know how long any of this lasted. For me, it felt like hours. Later, my husband told me it had only been moments, maybe some like seconds. Then I suddenly heard something calling my name, Elena, Elena. I opened my eyes and there he was, Jim, my husband, kneeling beside me, shaking me, calling my name over and over again. He looked worried. He later told me that he had heard a loud bang and he immediately ran downstairs and found me lying unconscious in the hallway. I had absolutely no idea what happened. That time I had no idea. I was quite confused. I didn't understand why I was on the floor. For me, I thought I'm lying in bed. All I wanted to just go lie down and go to sleep. I still didn't realize how serious the situation was. Only later did I begin to piece together what had actually happened that morning. When I finally came around, I was sitting on the floor in the hallway. I was confused. I had no idea what had happened to me. Jim was asking me if I was all right, but I could barely think straight. The only thing I wanted to do is lie down and go for a sleep. But Jim, however, knew something was seriously wrong. He had heard the bang, found me unconscious on the floor, and he wasn't prepared to take any chances. Thanks God for that. He said, right, we're going to the hospital. I remember trying to tell him I was just want to sleep, everything is okay, just leave me alone, I need to. But he was like determined, we need to go to the hospital. He insisted. It was still very early on Saturday morning, about maybe 6 o'clock in the morning. He helped me to get dressed. I could hardly do anything for myself. I was standing there in my bathrobe while he helped me to pull my clothes on. Outside it was a cold December morning and I started to feel freezing cold. He helped me into the sofa in the living room while he got everything ready. Again, I just wanted to close my eyes. When he helped me to stand up again, I noticed blood on a cushion. Neither of us realized how badly I had hit my head. That was the moment we understood this wasn't simply a feint. There had been a significant impact. Jim drove me straight to the hospital. I remember seeing the news around a few days earlier about junior doctor strike, or they were planning strike or something like that. I was just thinking myself, I hope I don't need to go to the hospital. I wasn't left waiting for very long. The staff took me in quite quickly. The doctors examined my head and discovered that I had 2 cuts on the back of my scalp. They arranged a scan of my head to make sure there wasn't any serious injuries. I honestly cannot even remember if it was a CT scan or another type of scan, but it doesn't really matter. What matters that I've been told that everything looks okay, everything looks normal. There was no serious damage. That was a huge relief. But while I was lying on the hospital bed, something else happened. I became unbelievably cold. I was like shaking, not just cold because it was winter, but I was shaking uncontrollably. It's like trembling. I couldn't stop trembling. I remember lying there wrapped in blankets, but I still couldn't get warm. Then I heard one of the monitors start beeping. My blood pressure had dropped very, very low. The nurses came back very quickly. They put me on a drip, gave me medications, and covered me with more blankets. My temperature was almost 39 degrees. After a while, I slowly began to feel warm again. It was as my body was finally started to recover. Because my scan was clear, I wasn't admitted to the hospital. But before I could leave, however, the doctors had to close the wounds on my head because they were too deep. They didn't use stitches. Instead, they used that surgical staples. I remember they didn't give me any anesthetics. They simply cleaned the wounds and stapled them closed. I had 5 staples on one side and 4 on another side. It was so painful. But at that point, I was just grateful that my injuries weren't more serious. And before I was discharged, one of the doctors gave me some advice. He told me that if I ever started feeling dizzy again, I shouldn't try to push through or keep walking. He said, sit down immediately. It doesn't matter where you are. Sit on a chair, sit on a pavement, or even sit on the floor if you have to. His point was simple. It's far better to sit down with your dignity intact than to collapse unexpectedly and seriously injure yourself. So that advice stayed with me since. So eventually Jim drove me home. I was still feeling weak and dizzy. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. As I rested that evening, small pieces of my memory started to come back. I remember trying to pull myself along the floor. I remember the darkness. I remember another brief moments that I was crawling, then darkness again. Those memories returned like a puzzle one by one. The following day I started looking around the house, trying to understand what had actually happened after I collapsed. That's when everything began to make sense. The shoe cabinet in our hallway had blood on it. The door on our utility room, it was also marked with blood. Even the rack where Jim found me had a blood stain on it. Looking at everything, I realized I must have regained consciousness several times. I must have been trying to pull myself up using the shoe cabinet. At some point, I must have grabbed my handle of the utility room as I struggled to get up, but each time I must have blacked out again. I also realized something else that made me stop and think. The last thing I clearly remember before collapsing was standing beside our glass kettle. Thanks goodness, I never managed to pick it up. Sometimes I think about what could happen if I had collapsed while I was handling it. One more thing that stayed with me ever since. My hallway where I was found was no window above it. There is a skylight farther back in the house, but from where I was lying on the floor, it would have been impossible to see the sky through it. And besides, that December morning was cloudy anyway. Even today, I can't explain why I remember seeing such a vivid sky full of stars. I simply know that it's one of those memories that has never left me. It has now been several years since that Saturday morning in December 2022. Even today, I still think about it from time to time. Not because I'm trying to find all the answers, but because that morning changed the way I looked at life. For a long time, I believed that working harder was always the right thing to do. I thought being responsible meant never stopping, never taking a proper break, or letting anyone down. If I was tired or unwell, I carried on. If I needed to rest, I convinced myself I would do it tomorrow. And looking back now, I realize how dangerous that way of thinking can be. Our bodies are incredible. They work for us every single day, but they also give us warning signs. The problem is that many of us ignore that. I certainly did. I thought I was doing the right thing by putting my work first. I wanted to keep my customers happy. I never wanted to let anyone down. But no orders, no deadline, no business is worth sacrificing your health. If your body is asking you to slow down, please listen to it. Don't wait until your body makes that decision for you. There is another reason why this story has stayed with me so deeply. At the time this happened, my mom was still alive. None of us knew it, but she was already becoming unwell. And a few months later, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Watching someone you love go through that illness, like changing your life forever. Well, sadly, she lost her battle with cancer. And before she passed away, I finally told her everything that happened to me that morning. Sometimes I keep asking myself, what have happened that morning? And the truth is, I don't know. Maybe one day there will be an explanation. Maybe won't. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm simply sharing my exact story, how I remember it, what's happened to me. What matters the most isn't finding the answers. What matters is the lesson I learned. Life can change in a matter of seconds. One moment you are making plans for the day, the next everything is different. Since that morning, I've tried much harder to look after myself. I've learned that it's okay to rest. It's okay to slow down and go for a walk and just simply breathe. and it's okay to say, I need a break. Work will still be there tomorrow, but your health might not. If you are watching this video all the way till the end, then thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I know this has been very different from my usual hotel reviews and travel videos. I've kept this story to myself for a very long time, and it wasn't easy to share, but I truly hope that by telling it, someone else might recognize the warning sign before it's too late. Before I finish, I'd like to ask one small favor. If you know someone who works incredibly hard, someone who never seems to stop, someone who always put work before there's health, or someone who keeps saying, I'll rest tomorrow, please consider sharing this video with them. I'm asking because genuinely hope my story might encourage someone to slow down, listen to their body, and take this health seriously before this body force them to stop. And if this video helps even one person, then sharing such a personal part of my life will have been worth it. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people you love. And never forget that your health is the most precious thing you have. Your health is your wealth. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.